Hi everybody, my name's Vicky Hanner and I'm here to present for you a new unit. So this unit is about group activities. It's part of our suite, an elective from youth work, and it is a standalone accredited unit. So what I'd like to do is to get started. The CHCGRP002 sits beautifully beside the previous unit in youth work, which was around working one-on-one with young people and in the context of that sector, in that specialist area. This one is about working in group activities and how we do that to be able to provide services, to meet any gaps that there might be in your local area, and then also maybe some unmet needs in a community. How do we go about making that happen? Okay, so let's do our acknowledgement to country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And I extend this recording to anybody who may be viewing this, who do identify as First Nation or Torres Strait Islander people. So an overview. In this unit, we're going to be covering the structure of what we need to do in the group session to be able to complete the underpinning knowledge around running a group in a community setting for that demographic, which is young people. Young people sit around from the age of 10 through to 24 is recognised by government agencies. There is other work, of course, for children prior to that, but as youth work, and this is a youth work elective, this particular one sits around that 12 to 24 years of age. But of course, our work in youth work goes up to Gen Y, 35 years of age. So the government view that anyone on youth allowance is 18 to 24, and there are some exceptional circumstances from the age of 16 to 18. Often those ages, if that young person is no longer living at home, and they have the category of UTLAH. UTLAH stands for unreasonable to live at home, young person. So if you're working with the young person that's 16 to 18 and they are on an income, they would still be viewed as a youth and under youth allowance. However, there would have been some scrutiny around that and hopefully some wraparound supports. It may even be a Centrelink social worker that referred the young person if you're working in the sector. A lot of the young people who are the most vulnerable, high and complex needs, will be sitting in that 15 to 19 age group. Some may still be at school. Some may have disengaged from school. Some may still be at home. Some may be disengaged from home. Some may be victim survivors of something fairly traumatic. Some may have developmental delays. But who are our clients? So it's all young people. For whatever reason, they may access us. That's if the young person comes to us. This unit is about how do we go out to young people in the wider community and do that early intervention prevention work, make it fun, be engaging, put plenty of wraparound support services, bringing in other stakeholders in this space. So the purpose of this unit assessment is about how are you going to run a group? And firstly, what do you need to do to prepare that? How do we decide what's actually going to be a great program in the community? And who else do we need to bring in around us to be able to make that a consortia? Now, a consortia is a formal process. If we're going for a funding application, and if you're going to work or you already are working in the sector, then you need to know that where the jobs are often funded by government funding. And that means a funding program or a grant has been issued. It'll have very set guidelines on what efficiencies and effectiveness that someone has put in an application for that funding. And it's very specific on what those funds can be spent on. It needs to be, because it's taxpayer money. So people will lobby from the community up. This is part of this. Sometimes you might identify a need and you'll run a program as a pilot. You've got an idea, you think it'll be working, you'll engage people in your community, you'll deliver the program, and the feedback will be amazing. Then what do we do to keep it sustainable? How can we keep this going? So we're going to look at all of that. The assessment has skills assessment in it, which will sit around role play. And then there's also some written assessment work. One of those skills or role plays that are going to happen in a recording will be you taking your program information up to a supervisor. And the supervisor is going to hear your pitch. It'll be a persuasive pitch. So it'll be, this is what we've done, this is who we've got involved in this, and this is where we would like to head with this going into the future. And hopefully your supervisor, who has authority over those funds, will go, look, I really like your idea. You've done all the work for it. I can see everybody that you've brought in as part of it. Let's have a look at this and see if we can launch it and get some feedback on how well it does. So you may need to be able to do that step from start through to finish. This unit will show you how. Let's go. So this is, I'm going to break this down into bite-sized pieces, which is always a really great way to learn. I want you to take those brief breaks when I say, let's pause. That's for you to be able to take on board some of that information and process it. It's got somewhere to go. You'll have your learner's guide as your resource. You'll have these slides as your resource. You'll learn about, there will be a study session for this unit. You'll be able to come to that and have real time with the trainer, and you'll also be able to do the skills development as well. So Hader will offer for you, if you are looking for that time with the trainer in a small group, where you'll be able to unpack any questions for clarification that you may have, and you will also be able to come into that space and get assistance to do the skills assessment, have that recorded. If there's requiring another person in there, we make those arrangements for you as well. And you'll be given times able to do that. Some people are very independent learners. That flexibility is absolutely there for you as well. So we want to just make sure that you know that you've got the support while you're doing your learning with us. So yes, we are a virtual online RTO. However, we also have that connection with our learner community, and to make sure that you can access a trainer while you're doing some of this structured, independent, self-paced learning. I'll guide you through that. We'll have an induction video for you to watch as well. Okay, so we're going to have a look at what are all the components and aspects of a group, what types of groups. You'll need to select one because you're going to be putting this together. What's the purpose of your group? Why are we coming together? What are the resources that you need to put in place to actually deliver that program? And what happens with group development? Where's the strength in that? And what are some of the barriers as well? So the types and purposes of different groups and resources for group activities can be, gosh, where are we going to hold it? The venue. What equipment do I need? I don't know what program you're going to put into your assessment. Some don't need a lot of equipment, but if you're doing a basketball program because you wanted to improve the social inclusion for some of your young people, if that's the way you'd like to go with it. Then you'd need to be able to have a place you could play basketball. You would need some basketballs. You may liaise with stakeholders in a basketball facility. It might be a public one, a community not-for-profit org, it could be a commercial one. How are you going to get access to these? What information and material do you need to create to actually get that message out, have people come along to the program? Or are you going to take your program where young people already are? What kind of administrative support do you need? If you do get funding, then you need to do a financial report. So you're applying for the grant. Then you need to expend those funds according to how you said you were going to spend them. And you need to provide evidence that you did. And you need to be accountable for those. You might need admin support to do a Facebook group, an information session, some brochures, getting some things out on notice boards. So who's going to do that work, that side of it, the financial reporting side, and the marketing and the promotion side of it? And then who are the specialists and expertise that you may need in this space? And can we refer young people after that program onto that? How are we going to get those stakeholders to be involved right from the beginning to plan it, then to actually deliver it, and then to review it and see, was that good? And will we do it again? And if so, how can we make it sustainable? So let's start with group development. For every new group, no matter what we're doing, you're already doing these things now. You meet a group of people until you get to know them. You're not quite sure about them and they're not quite sure about you. So we use certain things, tools, our interpersonal skills, our active listening. Usually we come in because we've got a similar interest as well. But when we're working in the community setting, we're there to actually make sure that we deliver something that's going to be measurable and accountable. The government will insist upon ROI, which is return on investment. And if the grant has been provided, then our reporting and our evidence gathering around this, even how your group met, we met 6 times. Here are the minutes to that. If somebody asks, you set up a timeline around the program. So it'll run for 12 weeks, every Saturday morning between 10 and 12. That might be how you do that. You've got to come together as a group and decide all of those things, all of the who is our demographic, our target group, who are we wanting to reach out to? What is it that we're going to be delivering? How are we going to deliver that? When are we going to deliver that? And why are we delivering that? And how are we connecting with that target group? If it is young people and they're with family members or a carer or guardian, then you need to be ensuring that it's safe, supported, and supervised. So whatever message that you put out there, whatever promotion and marketing, then you're going to be actually speaking to somebody else. It may be that there is no fee to be part of it because the funding may already be there, and that's information you need to say. This is sponsored by, and you need to make sure that you've got the funding logo and permission to use that. You may have some other donors and sponsors who want to be part of that. They may donate in kind, meaning it might not actually be goods, and but it could be hours or other service providers. So we want to acknowledge those people as well. When we're putting together something like a community youth program, there's a lot of things to have a think about. This is going to help you with what it is that I need to do from the moment you've got a thought, to take your thought to a group, to collaborate, to come up with a final decision, and to find out who are going to be doing which part of this, and delegating and sharing that workload over. So let's have a look at when we first jump into that group. So I know that when I'm working with young people in a group setting, that we're going to have our forming That can take a moment. Then it'll rise. So we'll move into that storming. Some young people might flip that around. It might be storming first, depending on what's happening for them, because we know that we often work with vulnerable young people, and a behavior is really an underpinning something else going on. We understand that as we're working in the sector. Some of the core units that we do in our studies unpack more of that. What is happening? What are we really seeing? So it can look like storming because it is a maladaptive behavior, or trying to get them settled to be able to do that work. But we'll start with forming, then move to storming. Okay, you're going to have some conflict, some disagreement. Perfectly okay. Even with adults who are all professionals, it should be an environment. It can be an environment, and we can create an environment where it's a robust discussion. This isn't about right, wrong, good, bad, my way or the highway. This is about forming a team. And if it doesn't flow right from the get-go, some magically do. I have been in some amazing groups, but then I also have been in some where people are enthusiastic to start with. When they turn up and the discussion starts, it's like, you know what, I don't think this is something that I've got time for, or it's going to fit kind of where I'm headed. That's also perfectly okay. This is a natural part of the Tuckman's group development theory. So then we move into, once we get through that, what does that look like on the other side? Who are still involved? How do we manage that? If we think win-win, and we move into, okay, now we've got a bit of a flow. Now we know what we're doing. Now we're in performing. Now it's actually happening. And then how do we finish our group? I believe that how we finish something is equally as important as how we begin something. I think a lot gets left with the exit of services, groups. I think a review, unpacking, getting some feedback. The government would expect that you would do surveys and feedbacks on this. If you ever do go into the qualifications around youth work, or any type of studies around requiring you to do these units and more in this space, some qualifications require you to go into work placement. This unit definitely does not. However, it applies over into the workplace. So some of the work here would then be easily transferred over. But if you aren't going into that space, just this knowledge is enough to help you enter that space a little more informed, with a few more skills and some key learnings that you'll take out of this unit. So I would like you to reflect on a time where you've maybe been part of a group. Sometimes I'll hear young people talk about, well, we started a band, okay, we formed it, and then everybody wanted to be the lead singer. A little bit of storming going on there. We did do a bit of practice, and we kind of like got the gig going, and we had a place, and we ended up going back there, and their mum was a good cook and all that kind of thing, so that was good. And then we're actually, the band is, you know, really starting to get there, and then they're promoting themselves. And then what happens if two or three can no longer do that because they've moved and going into studies, or life changes for them? How do we wrap that up, leaving a positive outcome with it, and then debriefing afterwards, getting some feedback? Look, you know, what went well and what could we have done differently? You'll need to do that survey and get that feedback as well. So when we do activities, I'm going to make sure that you've got some resources around that. One of the key resources that I want to provide for this one will be sitting around what's your why and what's your how. We'll go into Simon Sinek's The Golden Circle, because that formula relates over to not just business, but anywhere where you have connection with people, one-on-one or in a group. But it's how we go into this group. Sometimes we can be part of a group and you may not necessarily get everything out of it, But there are some unexpected learnings when we're in that experience, access, exposure. Sometimes your future employer could be in a completely unrelated program that you're in. You're being watched in the community sector. If a job comes up and you are interested in it, or if, say, your program is going to shut down and the funding's no longer there, but you go to a community interagency meeting, if you've been attending meetings and working in other programs and collaborating in that space, and someone goes, if you ever hear of anyone who's looking for work, we've got this gap coming up. And you can say, actually, there is someone who I think their program's ending, and I can put that word out to them or flag it for them that it's advertised. They may not have seen that. So only 17.5% of employment comes from job agencies. It's identical to what it was with CES when that was running the Commonwealth Employment Services. And then in 1996, everything moved out of the government-controlled area and it moved into programs. These programs were Job Network. People applied for the funding, said we know how to get people jobs, how to get employers to be connected with that, and we can run programs for people to be work ready. So we are involved in lots of programs, but sometimes we don't see it like that. But when we're around there, that networking and stakeholder engagement is what I call a soft interview or reverse marketing ourselves. So how we conduct ourselves in a band, which has nothing at all to do with being a team leader in another program, but everything has something to do with everything else. We're very connected in communities, but when we're going forward and we want people to see us in a professional setting, then everything we do matters. And while that may not be the program that you really enjoyed or thought it was going to be like, other things can come out of that. Great contacts, collaboration. I call this community capacity building. Community development officers do that as well. So we're developing better supports and services, connection, reducing social isolation, improving the economy, the mental health. There's lots of other whys that we jump in there. Have a think about a program that you've been involved in and bring it back to what we're talking about here in this unit. I think you'll find that you may have some knowledge stepping into this already of an experience, perhaps a positive one, and then also perhaps a negative one. But what did you get out of that? Even if it is how not to do a program. That in and of itself can be very valuable. Okay, now I know that didn't go very well, but what was the reason behind that? You really can't learn about that without sometimes reflecting back on an experience through a different lens. We may need to convince some people to come to that program. Some young people may be told to go to that program and don't want to. Having come from community sector for a while, and I have worked in the recruitment as we moved out of that space, often it is a requirement to come to those programs, or you aren't able to access funds for being underemployed or unemployed. It's referred to as a mutual obligation. Sometimes it's mandated someone must go there. So that's my job as the person who's leading that program, to make it an unexpected outcome for them. Yes, you may have to be here, but that's the bit that gets you through the door. But could I make that of value for you once you are here and pleasantly surprise you that you get more out of it than what you thought it was going to be? And so sometimes it's you've got to do 75 hours and people go, oh, I'll do the 75 hours as fast as I can and get out of here. But then you get to 75 and you go, we're at the end of that program, and they're going, well, how can we keep coming back here? Because they're going to get those things out of that group if they have that intention. Some people, I'm going to do my 75 and go, great, that's okay too, because that's what they came in for. That's the participant expectation. And we need to make sure that what we say we're going to do, that we deliver on that. Your reputation goes with you. So that can be a legal requirement. And then the ethical is how we manage and conduct ourselves, how we facilitate that program so it's safe, supported, and supervised for people, and how other people that have expectations in there, might be the funding body, might be your organisation. We give you a simulated workplace environment, an organisation called First Access, and the role play is your supervisor in First Access. And for the sake of this learning, you are a support worker for First Access. So we'll give you the resources in a dashboard, policies, procedures, incident reporting, client case notes. It's all going to be available for you, the same as what it would be in your workplace. These resources are actually matched or mapped. We call it in training, mapped exactly to this particular unit for the competency. So what are some of the legal and ethical considerations? Well, we spoke about the codes of conduct, how we manage ourselves, which is professional, within the guidelines, the policies and procedures of the organisation, but also all of the legal requirements, the Privacy Act, 1988, human rights, the Geneva Convention. You might have some other guidelines, but the discrimination as well, disabilities. It just depends on who your target group is. You may have to have requirements of working with children check to be able to go in and work with young people. You can get that clearance. The legal regulatory bodies require that of anyone who's going to be working with young people. So in that space, it could be that you're a student or a volunteer, and you can apply that way. So for yourself, just studying with HADA makes you eligible to do the student application, and your RTO would be HADA. You can apply for that. It's if you are approved for that and you get the clearance for that, then it's a very quick move from the suitability card into the NDIS space, because some investigation has happened. It can be smooth, perhaps unless you've had a stint overseas, or you your country of origin was different and now you live here in Australia. You can still apply, absolutely. It just might take a little longer, simply because the investigation will go from birth right through to current, and it'll become an international search, because the NDIS card already identifies that that target group is very high and complex need. So they already know that the intake and assessment is that anyone who is in that NDIS space is requiring additional adjustments, reasonable adjustments around things, but they are vulnerable. They may have differing abilities and approach. We can do psychosocial work under NDIS as well. So the NDIS card can take a little longer, but I find 6 to 8 weeks is pretty common. But as far as student or a volunteer, if you're going then and you don't require an NDIS card, where in your state or territory, then to go from student volunteer up to a paid position, which is a different clearance, is usually very smooth, provided there's been no matter before the courts. So there is an appeal process that's usually very effective. If you say, oh, I can demonstrate from a moment in time in my history to where I am today, those measures that I have been able to put in place to turn things around. So legal and ethical considerations for group work is privacy, record keeping management, work role boundaries. Like, this is where I don't do that work. I don't have personal relationships with any of my clients. I've never in 29 years ever brought a client to my personal residence. I never have, and I never would. For me, work role boundaries need to be healthy. It puts something very clear there for the relationship between your client, your young person, and yourself. And you have responsibilities for yourself to make sure that you have your privacy as well. And if you have family, that your work doesn't merge over into that space. For good work-life balance, we need to have healthy professional boundaries as well. And then, of course, workplace health and safety. In certain states and territories, workplace health and safety legislation has moved into psychological safety as well. So in 2023, in Queensland, where I am based on Tarrabilla and Bundaland, then in October of 2023, workplace health and safety legislation included psychosocial welfare in that space. So a lot of staff, we would have first aid certificates, CPR, and then we would also have perhaps mental health first aid as well. So psychological safety is discrimination, bullying, exclusion as well. Sometimes people only think an injury is what you see or a hazard is what you see, but we recognise that that has to look different. If you run a program just because we cannot see a psychological injury, you need to make sure all of those factors, when you're running your program, it is your legal and your ethical under your duty of care to ensure that it is safe, supported and supervised, and to know ahead of time what is unsafe, and if there is an incident, how do you report that and how do you manage that? Let's move into the stages of change. Now, there's a brief video there for you to have a look at. What's that going to do? It's going to talk about the pre-contemplative, so trans-theoretical model is behaviour of change. Maladaptive, or rather than adaptive, okay, I can adapt to change. I have resilience, I've got agility. Change happens all the time. Some people are I guess, unsettled by change because they don't know what that might mean. If everything was going okay, why are we changing it? Sometimes people feel that things have been changed and it wasn't an improvement. But we need to lean into this stage. To do that and understand that, we need to know what is the theory around change. So there's the pre-contemplative stage, and that is I'm nowhere near making a decision. And the contemplative is, oh, I've got a bit more information. Now I've got something to think about to help me make that decision. The preparation of change. Okay, we're going to make this change. What have we got to do to make it happen? Then the action, that's implementing that plan. And then that's looking after the plan. And then that's the ending of that. So this is the process that we use when we're running a program. You're bringing people together. They're not quite sure. They've got some good questions. They want to provide input. Gives me something to think about. I'm in. Okay. And then from there, what are we going to do to prepare? Here's our goal. Let's work our way backwards from that. What are the action steps? And who are we going to delegate these action tasks over to? And when do we need to have them by? What do we need to do to maintain that so that everything continues to flow? And then how do we wrap it up if, say, something finishes in 12 weeks? So in Tarrabilla and Bundaland in Queensland, where I am based, our school terms may be different to the state or territory that you're in. But we have 40 school weeks in a year. So the highest population of young people that we might capture under the age of 18, if I'm working with that target group, could be 40 weeks a year. However, there's 12 weeks of holidays, and out of those 12 weeks, I have found that there are 10 weeks of school holidays. Now, that is that work that a lot of youth workers get to do. It could be weekend work, and it could be school holiday programs. That is the preparation side of things. if I want to do that, when is the best time to get them? How will I find them? What if they don't come to us? Can I go where that community of young people already are? Or are we running a program where it's a requirement? You must go here and to run this particular program. So we need to be going through this to form the group that's going to be running the program. This can actually mean that we've got to come up with some ideas and brainstorm as well. Let's have a look at our interpersonal skills, our relationship building skills. So there is a time to share your own experiences. Like an onion, we don't have to take every layer off. We've got that really fine film on the outside. That could be just enough for some people. Some people might actually get right into that, but I'm fairly big on why am I talking in that WAIT acronym. WAIT stands for why am I talking, and this crosses over every area of work that we do. Because when we're one-on-one or in groups, that is collaboration. So one-on-one, it's about 60% of our client doing the talking and 40% we will speak, but our speaking is motivational interviewing or paraphrasing back, summarizing. Did I get that right? To understand what open-ended questions, what might that look like for you? And even the silences in between that, our body language sends a message. Those nonverbal cues can encourage someone to build trust. You establish rapport, gain that connection. All of that happens even when we're in a planning group. So these are your interpersonal skills. So there is some risk in self-disclosure. However, if you're running a program for people with a lived experience or their victim survivors, how do we have safe storytelling as people working in the sector? Sometimes it is helpful to share something, but how much we share is around our professional boundary. If I'm saying this, how will that be helpful to the person in the program? How will that be helpful to the person that is in this planning group? And then, of course, how would that be helpful with stakeholders? So it needs to have some relevance to stay on point. That brings us to our purpose. So rather than labeling people because of certain things, if they identify there is some risk in that, if we continue to talk about it, I think of this as open wounds. So we don't want to take people to a place that is unsafe for them to do that. Make sure that we run a program that it's safe. That's what safe, supported, and supervised means. So if it's going into another area, you, who's running that program, need to gently guide it back into that safer space, merge it back into another lane. That one you can go off, but the road isn't as smooth. And is that really why we're here? It could also mean, though, that it's an opportunity to speak to someone one-on-one because you're there for your deeper work as well. And if you've got enough people, it's like, hey, let's come over here. If you've got a conflict, you may have to separate two people. How do you manage that so that it's safe for other people who are observing that and viewing that? So we still need to bring all those micro skills in, and being an empathetic listener, recognizing and respecting individual differences, and providing emotional support for members as well. Sometimes these things, as we start to discuss whatever it is that we're bringing people together for, it can be very traumatic. It can be difficult. I've run programs where I've had an amazing guest speakers who are incredible leaders in their space. And it can, because they might be talking about something like, say, sexual assault, that a young person has been a victim to or is currently at risk. These guest speakers talking about safety as well. In one time of the year, we run programs around Child Protection Week, and that's national. And in that space, sometimes people can actually disclose to an adult because they think, this is me, that's my story. Even though the guest speaker may talk about somebody else's story, it can be triggering, and we need to be mindful. So we also need to provide emotional support for members, and then part of your risk management strategies, what do I do with that information? And when we see, I guess, a behaviour or something happening there, then we need to manage that situation in a safe way and provide the appropriate response. You're running a program, it may not happen, but part of your preparation and planning is, what if it does? These are things for us to consider. Let's take a short break here, just at this point. Get hydrated. Okay, hydrated, up and stretched, ready to jump back into some study work. So I hope you've got your learner's guide right there with you and able to reflect back on that, start to work through some of that. It's going to go into your task 1, 2, and task 3 for this assessment work. And now we're going to unpack a little bit more before we move into what our skills would be requiring. So what do I discover when I join a group? I learn a lot when I'm in that space. I learn a lot by listening and watching how other people do things, which I really like. Sometimes it's an informal way to learn, getting that experience. I did a lot of that when I was moving out of one sector and I wanted to work into this sector, even though I came from a completely different background before I went into the community sector. I found a lot of those skills transferred over, and you will, but our interpersonal skills are part of that. I've had some great leaders and mentors, so I think we learn how to do that well for others when we're in groups. There's different communication techniques, how other people say something and you go, wow, I like how they said that. I need to be able to improve in that space. So I like to have what I call compassionate inquiry. If you are looking for resources outside of which we always do our ongoing professional development, consider Gabor Mate, who talks about compassionate inquiry. We're going to see a great deal more of that in our sector, but it particularly relates to working with young people because we will see what's happening for them, all that energy around it. But compassionate inquiry is about us getting to that place of, and what happened to you? We're thinking that. And for us, when we're working with a young person, it's like, and what else? Not just the surface stuff, how we don't label or categorize or put people into a box. Oh, you're a this and that. Just be really open to it, because that layer that they're sharing may not show the whole thing. If you're working with neurodivergence, there's a lot of coping mechanisms that have to go into that space to be out there in public. You know, it can be, I get really anxious when I go into crowds, or so overcoming some of those things. It could be just that you're seeing, and then there's all this other underneath. So your communication technique is important. I like to think win-win, what will be in that for the other person. I'm not in control if it does end up like that for the other person. I'm not responsible for that, but I am responsible for my intention when I step into that space, and that's how we manage ourselves. So having good communication techniques is not being a good talker. Sometimes being a good listener is the most valuable person in the group, because they'll pick up things, or someone who's a great observer. It's like, oh, I noticed things that other people didn't notice. It's like, wow, that's great you saw that. I missed that completely. So communication happens more than one way. When we're working one-on-one, that is exactly how it is with our most vulnerable clients. It's your energy that you bring into that space where people feel that they're not being judged, that they are being believed. That's a communication technique. That's how you establish trust, through connection and your engagement. What happens if there's group conflict and negotiating? It's fine, like, don't be nervous about that. I, of course, manage the safety around it, but differing opinions, nobody hears you just if you speak louder. I can still hear someone if it's quieter. Do you have to raise your voice sometimes when you're running a group with young people? Yeah, if the group's big and you're outdoors and you want people to pay attention. But I can tell you that I have seen some amazing communication techniques where I'm looking at teachers in certain surroundings, they just put their hand up. It's a communication style. And when the teacher puts their hand up, that means I've got something to say. And then everybody stops talking so that that person can speak, because that's exactly how it is. If a student is in the room and they want to be able to put their hand up, they put their hand up and wait till they can speak. So the teacher is modeling that for young people, which I think if we didn't really understand communication, that's what actually playing out. So you get to set the guidelines around your program as well. So when we're in virtual classrooms, and if it's live, you can use the hand. It comes up on the screen. It says, I've got something to say, and can you come to me? When everyone else has had their turn. We have varying communication techniques. A conflict means someone has a strong point of view and they want to get that out there. And we can create a safe environment for that to happen. Our role, if we're running that program or facilitating that group or the lead agent in that space, we need to de-escalate that so it doesn't get in the way or everyone stays up in that heightened space. It's okay, we're there. But the goal is, once it's there, to de-escalate it and bring it back into that baseline in that regulated space. It's the same, the opposite way as well, because there can be conflict in resistance where nobody is participating or they're really flat and low. We don't always know the reason why, and nor do we need to know the reason why for us to be able to still continue to do our work. That's what empathy is. That's what mutual respect is not our job to force people out of their comfort zone one way or the other. It's our job to manage ourselves and then keep that consistency in there. If you've got skills and you've got purpose and you've got a plan and you work to your plan, then you know what it's going to look like to bring it back in line again. Okay, well, that was great. And acknowledge it. Don't just go, oh, that was really tense. I've seen grown people get up and walk out of meetings because they have been very upset about something or triggered by something, and it's a hot button for them. Maybe people knew that would happen, or maybe people it was unexpected. Maybe even the person who's going through that didn't even know that would be their reaction to that as well. So we need to have that safe, supported, supervised culture when we come together, even if it's brief. Everyone has a rightful place at that table, and the decision making and collaboration. And we aim for everybody to agree, but that's an aim. That doesn't mean everyone will. So think win-win. Come in with that intention. That's definitely your masterclass on managing a group. I'll give you some resources, some extra ones around that as well. So what is leadership? There is a risk of self-disclosure again, if you are that leader, what boundary will I work with? Avoiding stereotype judgments, being an empathetic listener, recognising individual differences, we've covered that, and then of course providing emotional support for members. So there are relationship skills, but they're also our leadership skills. So that's what role modelling is. So there's a brief section that you're watching a recording around how to lead your team. What is your leadership style and activity? Depends. You might go, well, when I'm in sport, it looks like this. for your program? What's your style going to be? What kind of people will come into that space? When we are working with young people, the two drivers that sit in that particular target group are, for young people, is who am I and where do I fit in? So when you're in a program, like, do you see me, or am I here because of this reason, or someone thinks I've got a problem? And and if you ask a young person why are you here, they go, because I was told to, or I don't know, yeah, thought I'd be curious. But there's great programs out there that end up getting other benefits, sometimes not even the original one that you thought was going to happen, which can be pretty exciting if you know to look for it as well. And we're not too rigid in that space. So communication technique is how you are as a leader. Collaborating is, I like to bring everybody forward with me if I can, if we all share the same vision, we're all there for a purpose. Non-verbal and verbal have a place in that for sure. Our body language, that energy we bring into the space, our empathy and understanding, our ability to be able to summarize and paraphrase, and then asking some particular questions, like intentional questions, because I need this information. So my intention is to get that. And so I'm going to ask these questions, the right questions, to be able to get the answers out there as well, and then bring them into the group think as well. And then we're going to summarize. Okay, so this is what we've been able to do today, and wrap that up. You'll do that when you report to your supervisor. So that'll be your written report, and that'll be your skills development. So you're going to need to prepare. Tell me about this group that you've been running. Your supervisor wants to know, and can I give you some money? That would be great. But it's going to be a persuasive conversation. That's your purpose of going in there. That's your intention. So you need to be able to bring that back. Conflict, look at this picture. What is it doing? What can you see in the nonverbal with that? I can see a listener. I can see someone talking. I can see a gesture. I can see some facial expressions. I can see some body language as well. Yeah, I can even see maybe a little bit of stress. The person who's speaking and the person who is watching it. Just because somebody has a little smile, that can often be a response to someone stressed. A smile doesn't necessarily mean that someone is happy. We're looking for the nuances that sit there. So how can conflict occur? How did we get there? Well, it's a strong people with opinions. Of course, you're going to have people won't always agree, like that's, we need to have, for healthy relationships, we want transparency and we want people to feel confident. So even if a client comes back and there's conflict and they're angry with you, provided it's safe, I see that as a sign of, well, we've got some trust here. You feel confident enough to be able to push back at that and say you've got it completely wrong, and our response is, help me understand. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got that wrong. What would it look like if I had it right? I've got to get to there. So if our intention is to be able to make this work, then we need more information. We need to adjust how we're doing that. That's where change happens, is to be able to address that. We need to compromise. Sometimes we're just missing pieces to a puzzle to understand, oh, is that what you meant? So some clarifying questions where you might be running. And then what influences a group conflict? There are some subjects that can really get people heated. I've got one football club that I'm a real fan of. If someone tells me that they're a fan of a different club or whatever, once I might have said, no, my team's the better one. And now I'll just think, oh, that's interesting. You must like losing. But I don't have to say it, but maybe I might. It depends. If I'm in a social group and they know that, often they will bait me to say that. And they know what I'm going to say already, but that's being predictable, and that can be safe to do that because that's fun. But sometimes if you're running a group and someone thinks it is a joke, it can actually be offensive to somebody. So safe, supported, and supervised is part of your role in that. So there's a time and a place where we can have some of those conversations. If we don't get the time and the place correct, the group, the cohort, then we definitely will have conflict, a resistance, a pushback of not wanting to get on the same page with everyone. So you might have avoidance, not going to participate at all, shut down. You might be someone who's a people pleaser, who's accommodating. You might have someone who is wanting to be agreeable. Okay, I can see your point of view. I could go with that. Yeah, that's most of what I was hoping I'd get out of that. Collaboration is we're all going to contribute till we get there. And then you can also have competing. How do we negotiate and still have all of that going on? And it's okay. You're not going to get people to share your vision and values. They're your vision and your value. People will work with you or want to be part of that program if you recognize, acknowledge, and respect them. And if there is some resistance to that, then it will usually come down to, I don't fit in here. It doesn't mean right or wrong. It just means who I am when I'm here just doesn't feel comfortable for me. So you can have conflict with others, but you can also have internal conflict as well. Gosh, I said I was going to do it and I feel really responsible to do it, but I actually don't know how to get out of it now. So that can be an internal conflict as well. To reflect on a time where that might actually have been part of something you've experienced. Task management is signposts. We will do this by this date. Encourage other people to contribute. Work against premature, everyone agree. Think of a jury. Yes, hang him. Oh, after morning tea. Oh, okay. I was hangry. All right. Okay, well, he might be innocent after all. So let's not jump to conclusions with a little bit of information where everyone goes, yeah, all right, that's fine. So that's where conflict comes in. It's okay to have robust discussion and differing opinions. If we don't, then we're not acting in a mature, emotionally mature space. EQ is emotional quotient. IQ is the intellectual. Someone can be particularly bright and I can go, you're incredible. How do you think like that? It's just, my brain isn't wired that way. However, their ability to communicate that over can sometimes look a little clunky, a little clumsy, and yet they're definitely not a clumsy person. It's just that putting words to those thoughts and that sharing of that information. So sometimes people will agree to keep the peace as well. And then how do we maintain that spirit of inquiry, that compassionate inquiry, keep that interest in there? Like, how do I get people to keep turning up for a meeting every week? And if people stop turning up to a meeting or stop coming to our program, there's a message in that as well. And what is that message? Am I going to be working on the right problem? So that emotional quotient, it sits in this space. If you could imagine a flat line, and above that line sits maturity. That's a high EQ. And the language will sound like this. I accept responsibility for the things I'm responsible for. I get it. I hear you. I can meet you there. That's a meeting of minds, compassionate inquiry. The lower EQ is usually lower maturity. Now, if we're working with young people, we've got to have an expectation of that because they're still developing and still learning. We can see that in adults. I can see that in clients. And I may be working with someone in their 30s or their 40s. And it's never a lens of mine where I go, oh, they should know better. A lens of mine is, what happened to you? And I could be working with someone who is, something happened to them at 14 and the 14-year-old is problem solving because they're under duress. So we revert to our least developed part of our personality when we are under stress. That is our place, our trauma response, where people will go to. So think about, oh, I've worked my way through that. That was a barrier for me. Now I'm moving to the next thing. You may want to run a program to help people to be more resilient and bounce forward and be more agile in that space. But maintaining that spirit of inquiry, a resistance to that, or don't know how to yet, could come from modeling behaviors, setting the culture, the environment, and how you keep that safe for people to be themselves or get to that. But it's in the language with everything, and that's communication. So it's like blame sits below that line where it's somebody else's fault. Deny, justify, and quit. So above the line, I accept responsibility. I'm stepping into this space. This bit's on me. I can own that. Someone who can't, it'll be in their language. It's not my fault if they hadn't done that. So that's blame. Oh, well, I did it because of this, like if they hadn't done that, I wouldn't have done it. So that's justification. Deny, that just never happened. You're wrong. That's where our conflict might sit. And then quit. I'm out of here. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. That's a place of conflict. We need to be able to model what that's like. When we come into a group program, we've got a lot of different personalities that we're trying to get to group think. Like-minded people usually are the most high performing, but a lot of groups might start up with bigger numbers, but they drop off because some people aren't able to step into that space with that intention, that compassionate inquiry. So if you come in with the intention of think win-win, a lot of things will open. You're making space for that outcome. Relationship management, avoid deviant behaviors. If you've got people in a program behaving inappropriately, make sure you've got a strategy to deal with that swiftly so that it's safe for everybody else. And use face-saving behaviors. Don't spotlight anyone in a group and single them out with an invisible finger point as well. Try and find strength-basedness. Like that's one way I had not thought of looking at it like that, in a respectful way. Manage ourselves in that space as well. How we coordinate groups is having good planning and preparation and making sure that we've thought of every possible thing that could go wrong. And that's your risk management assessment. So when we're doing submissions for funding, we need to be able to make sure that we're very clear on what it is that we want, who we're going to get it from. All of your group sessions are around the planning, having good aims and objectives, and then what are some of those people skills, those characteristics of the participants, and who are we going to get to be part of it. So I think of demographic, age group, psychographic, a particular group, a particular cohort or target group inside that. So be really aware and have clarity around that. Like I work in a program, absolutely, I know what it is. The core service that sits around it, it's a really simple program. It's not cluttered down with too many words. It's a housing and homelessness program, and it takes the young people at risk that nobody else wants. Straight up, that's it. It's not more complicated than that. That you can have a lot of meetings and you can do a lot of talking and you can run a lot of programs. But if you come back to that core, that aim, that mission statement, your value principle that you're in there, it is simple. Sometimes we make things harder for ourselves. So just have use that as a reflection point for yourself. What do I want it to look like? And try not to get all caught up in the other stuff, the external things. When people come into your program, they're coming in because you told them it was going to be something. If it ends up being something else, then you haven't been clear in your own goals or in your preparation and planning. Or you didn't have a good understanding of what could go wrong. We need to get some feedback. What did we do well and what could we do differently? We want that feedback. How can we improve that? Why should we collect it? after a group session to know if we actually met the expectations of people. And if not, what did we miss? It can be a survey, can be let us know, those kids all have their hand up, super easy. It could be, oh, smiley faces on a hard copy. It could be electronic, like Survey Monkey. I encourage you to set one up for this assessment, just for the fun of it, so you know how to do it. And at the very end of the session, and then maybe a day or a week afterwards, we call that our longitudinal, and that can be even 2 years afterwards, depending on your program. If part of your aim is we want young people who come to school, we're going to run the program in grade 12 at the end. I'm in Queensland, of course, so we say grade 12, but this final senior year. And then we're going to do some longitudinal surveys. We're going to do it in 1 year, we're going to do it 2 years, and then we're going to do it at 5 years. And that could be that the funding is there for that program to be able to get that data and then bring that data back. That's how something will be sustainable. Well, it delivered. So effective evaluation is smart goal setting, measure it. Make sure we meet the needs, the inputs, that the activities are relevant and safe, and the outcomes as well. So an effective evaluation is if we've linked all of that together. Can we compare results to the comparison group? Well, we had a lot of young people who didn't go on to work in this period of time, which is what we decided to find out. We wanted to improve that because we identified a gap in the beginning. If you remember where we started, why are we all here? Why are we talking? And so it's like we want to reduce unemployment for young people exiting school from 37% to a lower number. And if at the end of this, you've got 85% of your young people go on and they are successful in that, and you've tested and 2 years later, they're still successful. They may not be with the same employer, but they're still in a sector, or that gave them confidence and a stepping stone to go up to the next one. From there, you know, the effective evaluation and feedback could be, we got there, we did well. And the unemployment now is sitting at 12%. That's a measurable outcome. Nobody loves that more than a funding body. Here's a problem in the community. Here's some funding. Please, anyone apply for that if you'd like to. We want to see you work with the group. That's why it's important. That's called a consortia. A government will love a funding application, or your employer will like a program that you've put together where you're bringing in wraparound supports. To do that, you've got to have a group. You've got to have stakeholder engagement. You've got to improve those seamless referral pathways for your clients and for their clients back to you. That's community capacity building, and that's what this unit is all about, our group work. So think of an idea, project and a program, coordinate the group, gather the input and feedback and evaluate it. What went well? Any final questions that you have from your group? My feedback for this I've given you throughout this recording, and I want to thank you for taking the time and listening to what it is and go through your materials. Please join us in a study group. It'll be one of our trainers who are going to be able to assist you. It might be sector questions. They all work in the sector, but it might be something around help me unpack my assessments in readiness for my written work or for my skills, my practitioner skills, which is in our role plays. And then, of course, we open up that time to support you with both. Right, so I want to say thank you very much. Enjoy this unit. It's a very powerful one. If you're good at running programs, and then you're going to reach a lot more young people in the community. There's always better together and strength in numbers. So let me stop sharing. And I want to be able to say thank you so much.